So most times in life, we all think that, you're born into a family and that family is awesome and everybody lives a wonderful, happily ever after life. But that's not always true. Life sometimes can be very challenging, and it can be even most challenging, never mind for the adults, but especially for the children that are living in that home. So today we have a special guest for you, and we're going to be talking about his life story, what is now turned into a book, which is now turned into a movie. So hi, for anyone who doesn't know me, I want to welcome you to This is Let's Get Real. My name is Glenda Kroll. I'm a life coach and a reinvention specialist, helping people to obtain their passions in their life and knock through those challenges, such as not having the confidence and that what we call self-esteem that we need to have in our life and move on. And I want to welcome my co-host, Nicole Harvick. Hello, Nicole.
Hello there. How are you this beautiful Wednesday? It's actually sunny here in South Carolina, so I'm always excited to be here. And I'm particularly excited for this guest today because I've talked to him and we've messaged, and he's got quite the story to tell us today, which, you're right. You always think that the childhood you grow up in is normal for everybody, and that's just not the case. And, I look back on my childhood and, while we had our bumps in the road, nothing compared to what this man has gone through. So, he's the author of the book, Who Am I? And it details his horrific childhood and how his mother actually murdered his stepfather in 2001. And you're right, this is now being turned into a movie. And Hollywood writer Stevie Long is writing the movie script, and it's obviously based on Chad's life, and it's going to be filming in San Francisco in 2024. And so we're going to learn all about that. But this is one of the most positive people I have ever messaged or talked to. He just recently got married, and I'm so very happy for him. He is just glowing with happiness. And let's bring Chad Gaines to the stage and hear this amazing story that he's going to tell us.
Hello, Chad. Thank you very much
everybody.
for joining us today. Hi, we're delighted to have you on.
Thank you for having me today. Nice to see you.
And this is the first time we've chatted on Messenger or Facebook, but this is the first time like I've heard your voice or now I know you're real because I can hear you and see you. So this is very exciting.
And I want to, first of all, I saw in your looking through, and I just saw that you recently just got married, and I wanted to congratulate you on a beautiful bride that you have been able to bring into your life. And it looks like it's a fairy tale, but obviously fairy tales didn't start off like what you have right now, did they?
No, they did not.
So
we got married in Hawaii about a little over a month ago now.
Yeah, beautiful picture. You're both handsome and beautiful. So congratulations on that, Chad. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
So Chad, it sounds like,
thank you very much.
From reading some of your past, you've gone through quite a cycle in life. And, most people think that they grow up in a house where there's happiness and there's singing and dancing, and we all dream of that happy household. But from the sounds of it, yours wasn't that fairy tale household. Can you give us a little background?
No, It
of your
definitely
life?
wasn't. Of course. Sure. I was born in the Midwest in the 1970s, early 1970s. Um, I was the only child born in my house, and my dad left when I was about 6 years old.
Mm.
And that's when the physical abuse and the emotional abuse really started from my mother.
So your mother was the abuser?
Yes.
So how does a child, how old were you at that time when it started?
Oh, I was probably about 7 years old when it really got really vicious.
How does a 7-year-old deal with all of that?
Mentally, it's impossible for a child to deal with the things that I went through. Um, Also, it carries into your adulthood, the choices you make, the relationships you get into, the finances that you have to deal with as an adult. It changed everything to me, much like a train wreck, really.
Wow. And at 6 years old, what, I look back on my kids when they were 6. And that's a stage and an age where kids are learning. Kids are learning who they are, they're learning the ways of the world. Have you ever really looked at your mom and figured out what was her catalyst for hurting you or beating you or verbally abusing you? Can you look back and see a pattern?
I think it was a consistent pattern. I don't ever remember it being any different than that. When my mother would tell me in elementary school she was going to kill me, that was just a normal day for me. So I didn't know anything different other than probably when I was 8 years old, I went over to my friend's house and he had a loving family and brothers and mom and dad. And I knew something was majorly wrong with my situation.
Yeah, a
So
young child that age is, it's, you don't know the difference because you didn't learn anything else because that's not what you were exposed to. And then to turn around and all of a sudden see that your friends had something very different. So the signals must gone all up. Now, how did you, at that point, did you go to somebody for help? Who did you reach out to? What happened? Tell us your story.
Uh, I definitely did not. It was probably programmed into my head to never say anything. Isn't it? Even as an adult, even though that both of my parents have passed now, I still feel the same way. I'm just now speaking about the graphic details of my life. So back then, it wasn't even an option to go talk to somebody about what was going on in my house. Not at all. I think by the time I was 9 years old is the first time that I confided in somebody, which was a principal at the elementary school, because I had failed 5 times in elementary school due to child abuse for missing so many days. So I was way behind everybody else. But when I talked to him and he seen some bruises on my arm, that's when he went to the authorities and they had come in and did the interview with me in his office. Took off my shirt and they took pictures of the bruises and the beatings on my back and things like that. Uh, at that point, my mother was tipped off by the local police because she went to school with most of them, so it was a very close community. And at that point, um, I came home from school one day and there was a Ryder truck parked up to our front porch. And my mother told me, grab what you can because we're moving right now. And that's all I was ever told. I didn't know until years later that the CPS and the state police were investigating child abuse for one of the worst cases in Indiana at the time. And we just fled. We just took off, and we drove to the middle of Florida. She said, "This is where we're going to live at now." And we just started a life over to get away from it.
But did you get away from it?
I didn't get away from it. No, not at all. At that time, I was probably 14 years old, had a huge growth spurt. And my mother was, I hate to say this, but it's the truth. She was an opportunist. She was just looking for moments to either spit on me, slap me, whatever the case may be, humiliation, to the point where I had that growth spurt, and she was, I was too tall basically for her to beat on anymore. So that's when she threw me out on the street and said, "You're old enough, take care of yourself. You're big enough, go figure it out."
Wow. And I'm just wondering, like, when you were smaller, when you were little, was she an alcoholic? Was there drugs involved? What the mindset of a mother that does that to a helpless child? I mean, like for me, I got up, I cooked breakfast, drove them to school, but was there a catalyst for her to hit you? What did you say something, or was she just so angry at life that she took it out on you?
Well, that could have been possible. She always used the excuse, her mother treated her this way, so she needs to treat me this way. That was her excuse. My grandmother was also very vicious in her actions toward her children. My mother, obviously, to me. Up until that day where she said, "You're big enough, go figure it out." And here I am at 15 years old, sleeping on the streets, working at a grocery store. And that was my life. I didn't think that it would obviously end up where it is today, but I didn't really think for many times and many months that I was going to get through that. No 15-year-old should be sleeping on the street.
No, absolutely not. And when she kicked you out, did you see her after that, or what was the relationship like? Did you, and I think, did you have a relationship with the grandparents at all, or friends whose parents you could talk to, anything like that?
I really didn't have anybody or anything. I just really had to figure it out. I was forced to have that connection with my mother because this is the mind games that they would do. I would come home from school and they would throw a change of clothes out on the driveway for me to pick up. And then I would go wherever and clean up, which is usually like a 7-Eleven or somewhere in the bathroom, go to school as long as I could. Then I had to drop out of school because I had to eat, take care of myself. So that's when I started working at the grocery store. But it was kind of like a forced relationship where they made me need them for my clothes and those things that you need to survive. So it would be like one change of clothes a day. You come over and I'll throw some more out there to you, and you can retrieve it like a dog and go on about your business. So that was the moment where I started doing and getting involved in some criminal activities for money and profit and
Sure.
all those things that led me down a deep, dark road, drugs and alcohol at 15 years old.
Yeah.
And that's where I got shot in the face. And finally was convinced, hey, maybe you need to go back to Indiana to get out of this stuff. Now you're almost an adult. They're not going to probably track down your mom or question you when you get back. And I come from a very small town in the Midwest outside Chicago. So for me, I just took a ride with my uncle back to Indiana. and resumed right where I left off. Got away from the drugs because there wasn't much in that area.
And where did you sleep? At 15, on a park bench, on a,
When I came back to Indiana?
No, when you were still dealing with your mom and getting like your one change of clothing a day.
Yeah, I was sleeping at a softball field. There was a softball field right behind our trailer park where we lived at the time. And there was like this picnic tables, but it had like a topper on top of it to keep me sheltered a little bit. And I would sleep under the picnic table.
Now, you said you were in Indiana, right? With your mom before, yeah. So it's cold there. I know Indiana has really cold weather. I'm so blown away of a mother's treatment like that. So you couldn't go back in that house. You could do nothing. You had to find every night a place to sleep where you were safe, where from harm, where you hoped to be warm. And you talk about an uncle. Was he not there to help, or anybody you could have gone to lean on for help, or anybody to talk to?
No one to talk to. I did take that ride back to Indiana with my uncle. He kind of dropped me off and we were kind of went our separate ways. And he said, well, you're 16 now. So I was telling my story to a gentleman who had contact with an attorney that does emancipation. And I was able to go to court and get emancipated and begin work at a factory at 17 years old.
17. And tell us about you said you were shot in the face?
I was.
What's the story? What's the story behind that?
That happened in Florida. When I dipped into drugs and alcohol and was experiencing that for the first time, it really took my life in a different direction where I became so addicted that I was stealing drugs from one gang member and one gang and selling it to another gang. And they kind of caught up with me at a party and realized what I was doing and shot me. And I was in the hospital for many, many months. And then when I got out, that was the decision I had to make. Like, if you stay here, you're going to die. I got a free ride back to Indiana. Maybe I should take that.
So how does a young man at the age of 17 change his life around? Yes, you got emancipated from your family, but how do you begin again?
Well, I didn't realize how unfortunate it was and how it affected me probably for another 10 years after that.
Wow.
Because I went through different relationships and got into a bunch of trouble in that time and just couldn't figure out or put my finger on what the major problem was. And I'm standing in a doctor's office. I'm probably 27 years old. I'm getting really bad headaches. And he said, did you ever have these when you were younger? Well, I didn't really know because a part of my life up until then, I had blocked out of my childhood. It took me another 3 years after that, when I was 30 years old, to get my transcripts of elementary school records and see how many days of school I missed to child abuse. And also on the back side where a doctor wrote major headaches.
Wow. And was that like from being beat, from being hit, from being pushed?
Go ahead.
It was all those things. Also, The physical abuse, yes, caused a lot of scars, broken bones, and those things, but the mental abuse will carry with me the rest of my life, even at 50 years old now. For the most part, it was just something that's just for the normal person that's never been through this, it's just incredible to explain to them, help them understand as mothers and fathers now, like that would not even be a thought that you would, even would cross your mind to harm your child or children or whatever the case may be. But I did start going to work at that factory. I got emancipated in Indiana. I did that for a while. And here I am. I found myself in the doctor's office going through all these tests and not finding anything. And then finally an MRI would show up white brain matter on the brain. And it would be from PTSD. And that would be from all the beatings and emotional abuse, mental abuse.
Wow. And your mother was never held accountable for that during that time because you left for Florida. So she
was never held. Yes.
She was never held accountable.
Never investigated. I found myself, like I said, in that doctor's office. She was never held accountable by anybody here on earth, I should say.
Wow. Yeah. That's correct. And to me, I sit there and like I look back on my childhood, and I compared to you, I mean, mine was a fairy tale compared to yours, but I remember certain things with my parents, and I would think, I'm not going to do this to my kids. I'm not going to yell. I'm not, certain things. And so one would think you could learn from what happened to you. But in her case, she just made that the excuse as to why she continued it. Well, my mom did it to me, so I'm going to do it to you. And I just,
totally,
I
totally. That was the same mindset as.
So she learned from her mother and kept that, kept that dysfunctionality. Go ahead.
Through her whole life, up until the day she died. Up until the day she died, she kept that mentality of, I'm never going to talk about what I did, take responsibility, ask for forgiveness. None of those things were an option in my mother's side of the family. And here I am now, a 28-year-old man at the time, and I get a phone call and she says, I think I just killed your stepfather. So not only did it go from child abuse, now it went to murder.
Wow. And it just, here's what blows my mind too, is when she did that, she calls you, who she's abused your whole life, but you're the one call she makes. What were your thoughts or your feelings, or what was that conversation like?
It was a very 5-second conversation. I got a phone call, just come home from work. I was working at that same factory on third shift, just went to sleep, and I got a phone call. I picked up the phone call. I said, hello. And my mother says, I think I just killed your stepfather. Get down here. And hung up the phone.
And what did you do?
I rushed out of bed. I ran 2 blocks to her house. And by the time I arrived, there was cops everywhere on the scene. I walked into the trailer where she lived. My mother sat in a a chair in the living room, kind of staring at the wall, not saying nothing, just stone-faced, no emotions. And we kind of sat there in silence for a long time. I'm not sure what's going on, what's happening. The coroner is in the bedroom. There's state police and city police all over the trailer. They're finding bottles of pills and all kinds of different things. And it was like watching a movie, only you were in the movie. It was so bizarre.
Wow. And what happened to her at that point? Was it self-defense? Was it straight up murder? Or did she finally get, is there some justice for her?
Wasn't self-defense. My stepfather was sleeping when it happened. I learned later, toward the end of his life, the last 6 months, they were doing a lot of prescription pills at the time, oxycodone, to the point where they were crushing it up and snorting it to injecting it. And she got carried away and filled up his syringe and shot it into his lower back when he was sleeping. He had a massive heart attack at 38 years old, and it exploded his heart, and he died.
Wow. That
was basically the end of the story.
Did she go to prison?
It was covered up. No, not at all. Autopsy showed a exploding heart. But what happened between there and the last 15 years that she lived her life free after committing murder, she began to tell people what she did and how she got away with it. So it wasn't just me. It was many other people that she surrounded herself with.
So did she didn't tell the cops that she had injected him? That she just let them think it was a heart attack? Or, I mean, like, hearts just don't explode. That's so weird. But no one questioned her or the drug abuse or, nothing?
No, nothing at all. Nothing at all. They did an autopsy. She tried to get him cremated to avoid that. His family stepped in and said, that's not what he would want. I don't know why you would even want to do that. And finally, at the last minute, she just told a bunch of people she's going to prison because they're going to do an autopsy and they're going to find it. And they did an autopsy. They only found the part where it exploded his heart. They didn't dig a little deeper to say what caused this man's heart to explode at 38 years old.
Right.
Case closed.
Wow. So as a young man now, then it's a very hard thing.
So there's a lot of.
Yeah. Please continue on.
Oh, absolutely. I was told every day, if you ever say anything about this, they're not going to find your body.
Was your stepfather abusive to you as well and help her cover things up?
He wasn't abusive to me. No. I mean, he was, pretty violent guy. She had found the guy that, that was like her personality.
Right.
And he was never abusive to me or nothing like that, because by then, I was 28, he's 38. He's only 10 years older than me. So it wasn't nothing like that. It was just those two become abusive and started using oxycodone and writing their own prescriptions to doctors to get the drug. And it just, it went out of control, and it eventually would end his life because of what she did.
Wow.
So there's a lot of things when I came to the point of writing this book that's now a bestseller, how deep do I go into this? You know, do I talk about things that most people already know that were close to me because she told them? Or do I just cut that part out of my life and go on? And when she died in 2020 or 2017, I decided that I need to tell the whole story and not be scared anymore. And
Good for
that's when
you.
I decided to dedicate my life to helping others not be so afraid anymore.
Wow. You know, and from the past you came from up until now, what clicked in you that said, I need to write a book and tell my story? What was the catalyst for that?
My 8-year-old daughter,
Ah, our children.
we sat down on the floor one day to play Barbies, and she looked over at a scar that I have on my arm where my mother stabbed me with a butcher knife. And she said, "Dad, what is that?" And right then I knew I had to tell the whole story. I just had to. Because one day it's going to click and she's going to say, "Oh, wait, where are your mom and dad?" Because she never knew them.
Wow.
But Chad,
So
how
that
do you
question's going to
go?
come up.
Yeah.
Yes. Chad, how do you go though from a child who is abused, and of course, not a moment of love is shed, to learning that life isn't about abuse and anger and hatred? It's about love, caring, and understanding. How do you learn those important factors of what life should be, not what you had installed in you?
Well, for me, it was about surrounding myself with positive people, people that I didn't know that I would ever position myself to be around. Because I grew up dirt poor, didn't feel I ever deserved anything in life. I still have those little, things that my wife has to get on me about, because I'll find myself down and I can't get out of bed for 15, 20 hours.
Wow.
It's something that is always going to be there. PTSD is not going to go away. You're going to live with it. You're going to take it with you. You decide to either accept it and how can I manage this, or you just give up, because the percentages of how many people that were abused from childhood that will end up in prison, or believe it or not, will end up as serial killers is staggering high.
That's
And
scary.
fortunately for me, I ended up in prison
Yeah. Yeah. And
because
what was what?
it
Go
takes
ahead.
something away from you that you never realized that you should have had.
So, why did you end up in prison?
Say that again.
Why did you end up in prison? Was it from the drugs?
I ended up No, very fortunate. I ended up in prison for organized crime. I got into some things, and I would, because I was older than some of the other ones that were involved, I was able to basically manipulate them into doing things, and I was taken down as one of the leaders of a gang.
Wow, never stopped.
Yeah, every time he says something, I'm like, wow. And was that in Florida, or you said Indiana?
No, it was in Indiana.
Okay.
It's a
And
prison in
and was
southern Indiana.
how long were you in prison?
I was there for 1 year in maximum security.
Oh gosh. You know, The odds of us even sitting here talking to you at this point with everything you've gone through are just so slim that you overcame everything to be able to tell your story is just a miracle, isn't it?
It's definitely a miracle. And, I can't do an interview or a podcast or where a book signing without mentioning how much God has saved my life. I mean, you can't tell my story without mentioning God. It's just not fair. So
Yeah.
anytime that I go into that situation, I have to give him the glory because I wasn't alone, you know. And I'm talking to you ladies about 1% of my life. 1%.
My goodness. How did you know of God, or did you find him as you got older?
Say that one more time.
When did you finally understand that God was by your side? How did he come into play with the background that you had?
Geez, I was probably 35 years old.
Did you start going to church? Did you start reading the Bible? Was it because you had a child and you knew things need to change? What was that actual moment that you realized that he is there guiding you?
Oh, it was definitely in 2004 when I had a horrific car accident. And it took them 3 days to find my car underwater. That's when I knew, because I went through some things there that took me 15 years to talk about.
Now, were you in the car or had you gotten out of the car? Tell us about that, because when you're saying you're telling us
I was
1%, you're just like,
no, I was
what?
the driver of the car. Yeah. Yeah.
And what happened?
I know.
Chad, you're blowing me away
I
with
was driving home from work one night. I was driving home one night from work, and it was in Indiana. It was in February of 2004.
Cold.
The roads were very icy when I was coming home. And I got hit by a driver. I don't know if it was a drunk driver or I don't know. But anyway, I closed the restaurant where I worked at 2 a.m. and was driving home about 30 minutes away. When I got hit, I remember grabbing the steering wheel with both hands. I remember the car rolling over and over and over. I could hear metal tearing away from the car, glass breaking, the radio's still going on as I'm rolling and rolling and rolling. And then the car comes to a stop. And then for some reason, I felt it sliding, like I was sliding down a hill. And that's exactly what was happening. It landed on its roof. All the windows were broken out. And it slid down into a 12-foot embankment into a body of water and began to sink. And that's really where my life changed at that point. I knew what I was going to do for the rest of my life at that point.
Okay, so.
And I walked away from that car wreck with absolutely not a single scratch.
Wow. Wow.
How did you get out of the car? How did you save yourself from that?
Again, it's one of those things that I didn't save myself. I wasn't alone. I remember This is the first time in my life. I'm 32 years old. 3 years prior, my mother had killed my stepfather. And just as I take my last breath going under the water, I'm still seatbelted in my car. All the water is filling up my car. And for the first time in my life, I said, Father, I don't want to die. First time ever. I don't even know where it came from.
I've got chills right now.
Yeah.
I've literally got chills right now.
So something saved
And I
you.
remember I'm under the water and I can still see the headlights. Absolutely.
I understand.
But you
and
weren't
I still got
hurt.
a picture of that car wreck when they brought my car up 3 days later.
Wow.
I was not hurt.
Who
Nothing.
was there when you got out of the water? Was anybody there?
When I was safe from the car wreck, the thing that I remember is I'm standing on the side of the embankment, not on the highway yet, but on the 12-foot embankment. My car is gone. All I can see is the headlights. And there are 3 people standing there. A guy and his wife that used to take care of me when I was a child, just the guy only. His name was Bob. My best friend that had died in a car wreck when he was 18, Mark, and Jesus.
Whew.
I didn't feel anything. I don't recall how I got up the 12-foot embankment. It was just like in a blink of an eye. And we were walking down this highway to the end of the road where there was a farmhouse.
I don't even know what to say right now.
The sense that I felt was I was very tall. It was almost like all 3 of us were like 10 foot tall.
Now,
And
were those?
I remember us, it was like we were looking down on different things.
Wow.
But it was like these beautiful fields of like beautiful flowers and green grass. And I still didn't understand what was happening, but I also nobody spoke. There was no like talk. It was like this communication, you know what they were talking about.
Wow. And so did you find someone at the farmhouse?
At the time, I felt this. I did. That's where this eventually would bring me back after I was put under the understanding there was more for me to do. Next thing I know, I'm on the front step of this farmhouse alone, 3 o'clock in the morning now, and I'm knocking on this door. A lady answers the door and said, I'm guessing you were in that car wreck. And I said, yes. How did you know that? And she says, because I heard it. It woke us up out of bed because it was so loud.
Oh my God.
And she goes, is there anybody trapped in the car? I said, I was the only person in the car. And she just kind of like nearly passed out.
Wow. Now, and so the man that had taken care of you when you're little, he had already passed also, correct? So you were with 2 people that you knew that had since passed away.
Oh yeah, he had passed clear back in 1984.
Wow. So they were there waiting for you to save you.
That's correct.
Your saviors.
Wow. That just gives me and this is might be a word, what did Jesus look like to you? When you say, how did you recognize him if you'd never really had any interactions?
Again,
You did.
Again, it was like it felt like and looked like we were like 10 foot tall. We were really, really tall. I don't know what the significance is of that. It was more comforting than anything else. It was kind of a sense where words didn't need to be said. You just felt this comfort. You didn't ask to go back. You didn't have any feelings or pains or nothing. It was just like you were led to wherever they were taking you.
Whew.
At what point then did you decide that your life was now changing? Was at that point that everything changed for you?
Probably the next day I woke up. Absolutely. The next day I woke up.
And so you didn't have to go to the hospital or anything? Did that lady just get help for you and you went home?
She drove me the 30 minutes back home, her and her husband. And I got home. Of course, there was a lot of questions because now it's, almost daylight. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. And where's your car? And my only answer was, I don't know. It sunk into a body of water, and I didn't know if we'd ever find it. It took the authorities 3 days to find it.
Chad, you went home. Who did you go home to at that point?
I had a couple friends that were there where I was staying at the time.
Wow.
And how at that point did you what was your first thing that you changed in your life?
Say that again?
What did you change at that point in your life? What was your first change that you made?
I started appreciating life a lot better. Instead of wanting things in my life, I started wanting people in my life.
Nice.
Wow. That's and had you written your book yet, or did that incident, your car sinking, was that the catalyst for the book, or had you already written it?
I hadn't started the book yet because I was getting death threats at the time by my family if I would ever speak out about the things that happened. But let me explain how significant the car accident was in my life. Because 6 months to the day of the car accident, I was honored as one of the 10 outstanding young Americans in the whole country.
Wow.
Tell us about that.
Well, as I spoke before, I was working at a restaurant the night the car accident happened. I was sharing my story to one of the coworkers that worked there. And what I didn't know is she was going home every night telling her husband my story. And he was a chairman on the board of the JCs, which is an organization that just helps so many people. Right. And does fundraisers and a lot of community help. And he came into the restaurant and he says, my wife has been sharing your story. I'm very interested in hearing more. And I said, okay, anytime. So we sat down and we probably had just a 15-minute conversation. And he says, well, he stated who he was, and he works on as a chairman on the board of the JC's local chapter at that time. And he said, but I have some really big connections with the United States JCs.
Wow.
And I want to submit your application for one of the 10 outstanding young Americans in the country. And then he went through the process of showing me how that works. There's 10,000 applicants a year, and they only pick 10 in the country. And he said, I don't want to get your hopes up, but you probably won't win this award. But this is an honor just to be nominated for this award. So I said, sure. And sure enough, like I said, 6 months after my accident, I got the phone call from the USJCs, and they said, we want to fly you to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We want you to speak in front of 4,000 people, and we want to give you one of the highest honors in America.
Wow.
It's the third highest honor in America.
My goodness.
Followed by the Points of Life award, who is only given to people by the President of the United States, and also the Citizens Award, which is the highest. And that was in 2004. In 2008, I was approached by the board of the Daily Points of Light Award by the President of the United States, and I was given that award. I was flown here to Washington, D.C., and to the Oval Office to get the award from President George Bush. And then later that week, me and another author, well, he was an author at the time, I was just a waiter at a restaurant, were honored by the President of the United States in 2008.
Wow. You would have never guessed. I mean,
what time did your book come around?
Yeah. It had been written on and off, a little bit here, a little bit there, but I knew I couldn't put it out to the public because of the death threats. I had to take a lot of family members to court to get restraining orders because they were viciously after me and worried that the murder would be exposed. So I moved to another town. Again, they found out where I was, had to take them to court, got restraining orders. And at that point, it was just a perception of, will this story ever be told? And then it got to the point where I wasn't told in the physical sense, but it was just like, all you have to do is outlive these people. You've made it this far. All you have to do is outlive them, and you'll be able to share your story on a nationwide platform that will inspire and help many, many people in that same situation. So that's what I did. All I did was just try to better myself and stay alive. That was it. I didn't do anything fancy or didn't do anything different. I just kept living.
You know what? You've been trying to keep yourself alive.
And I really started to write the details in. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the key to all this, really.
Yeah. And now, what does it make you feel like to know at some point you're going to sit in a theater and watch your movie on a screen?
Well, of course, it makes me feel great. It, My daughter is very excited, not just about the book that obviously she can't read because she's only 8 years old, because it is, it's graphic, but it's also inspiring. And she's really excited about the movie too, as well. And I think it brings me a little comfort of me doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but on a small scale, even with the movie and other things and different podcasts and book signings all over the country. I still feel like I'm only doing 10% of what I need to be doing.
Chad, you're just a remarkable gentleman, and I am so impressed and amazed with what you've lived through in your own life. And I would love to have you on again, because unfortunately we've had this lag as well, which has made it a little more difficult. But could you please share with our audience one important detail
Sure.
that you would like to share with other people who might be living through some of the difficult situations that you have lived?
Well, if you're a child going through what I did, of course the laws are much stiffer now, and you can't miss 47 days of school in the first grade, like I did, and then the next year 42 days, and nothing was ever done. We have a better system now. I don't want to say it's fully protecting our children, but it is better. It can be way better. I think it's about communication and looking for the signs that somebody is hurt or distressed. Now there's so many anxieties that, I deal with parents that have children that are 12 years old that have either wanted to commit suicide or have committed suicide. The parents will reach out to me. Parents that have teenagers that are on prescription pills or whatever the case may be will reach out to me for some coaching or other things that I have going on. But I think that's what it is. I think it's we live in a country now, I think, where we can be more vocal than we ever have, at least in my 50 years of life. And I think that's the most important thing. We just keep being vocal, and in a positive way, obviously. And just find somebody with the resources we have now with the internet and these sites where you can instantly message people. For the longest time, I didn't have anybody, even up until when I first started writing my book. I would work my full-time job and then lay in bed at night trying to put little segments of my life together. And I thought, wow, I really don't have anybody to talk to myself. So we live in a day and age where you can pick up your cell phone, and I could text wrong numbers on purpose.
Yeah.
And make hacks. I mean, it was amazing. You would not believe how many friends that I met by accident on purpose. Text random people and say, hey, I heard that you had a bad day. What's on your mind? Like, who is this? This is weird. Oh, this is Chad. You don't remember?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, so you gotta use the resources in a positive way that we have today to get the message out. There's no excuse for not getting the message out anymore. It was different when we were 10 years old and we were rarely on the phone and we talked to our friends, but now it's all communication online, and there's just really no excuse. Pick up the phone and dial a wrong number. Say, I just wanted to say you matter to me. You don't know who you're going to touch out there. You don't.
Yeah.
True.
What a great inspiration for all of us. No matter what, we're living in a time right now where there's so much going on, and people all over the world need to know that they matter. So thank you so much, Chad, for sharing
Absolutely.
this story that everybody needs to understand and know that they matter. Nicole, could you give us a
Absolutely.
yeah. Nicole, could you give us your words of wisdom here today?
You know what? One of the things that I've gleaned from all of this is each and every one of us have been vulnerable at some point in our life. Not to the situation Chad was in, but he's right. We're at a point now where kindness really, really matters. And you by looking at someone anymore, you don't know if they've had a bad day. You don't know if they've had a bad life. You don't know what might trigger them. And I always bring it back to kindness. And one of the things that I was downloaded is to always leave someone feeling better than they did before they met me. And that's not hard to do in this society. It seems like, unfortunately, if it's just a hello, if it's have a nice day, if it's something as simple as holding a door open from someone, looking them in the eyes, helping someone older with their groceries, whatever it is, it can be very, very small. But what we don't realize is it also can be very, very significant. And so I just want to leave it to you, to who's ever watching, to whoever's hearing this, is kindness is free. Give that willingly and give lots of it.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Nicole. This was a very heart-wrenching story today. But I'm so glad that this one person who knew that he had something that he had to share with so many of us, and to learn how much it matters to share, to love, to be out there, because that's really what matters today. Is if you see anything that isn't right, it's your right to speak up. And that's what we all need to do. And on that note, I want to say to thank you very much to Chad for coming today and for joining us and being totally real. Thank you, Chad. Chad, I honor you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I would love to